Pessoal, bom dia. Hoje eu estou aqui com um convidado que foi uma sugestão, inclusive, do Paul, que eu tenho muito a agradecer por ter dado essa sugestão aqui para o canal. É o professor Stephen Pollington, que, inclusive, dá aulas, né? Um grande especialista do inglês antigo, que era a língua utilizada no período anglo-saxão. Ele é também um dos maiores especialistas, no caso dos estudos da Inglaterra anglo-saxônica, e então a gente vai ver vários detalhes que ele apresentou. Ele tem diversos livros muito interessantes que ele lançou, né? O The Elder Gods é um dos mais conhecidos, e recentemente ele lançou, no ano passado, né, um livro só sobre Wodan, que depois, claro, a divindade se torna Odin. E então eu vou passar aqui sem mais delongas para a gente poder começar aqui a entrevista com ele. Mr. Pollington, thank you so much for accepting the invitation. Yeah, it's a big pleasure receiving
It's a
you here
great
in
pleasure to be
Japan.
here.
It's an honor here because I'm a very fan of your work, and I think we have guests in the channel that will be very pleasure to see you here and conduct this interview. So for first your start, I would like to know, how do you start your interest for research about the Saxon England and about the language of the Olden English? How you start your interest for these subjects?
I cannot remember a time when I was not interested. Even as a small boy, I was always interested in the strange words that we say, and why do we say this and not that, and why, all an inquisitive child. And I was fortunate to grow up in a part of England in the southeast, where it's near London, but there is still a lot of rural countryside, a very small environment with agriculture and woodlands and trees. And I always loved trees, just like Professor Tolkien, of course. And the place where I grew up was called Thundersley, which struck me as a strange name. What has thunder got to do with a place? And when I did some research in my teenage years, I found that it is Thunreslech. It is the woodland clearing that belongs to the god Thunor, who is called in Norse Thor, but in Old English Thunor. And of course, this made me very proud. So from that small beginning, I looked into the language, I looked into the mythology that sits behind the language and the details of the history. And I've never stopped looking. I'm learning all the time.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, how we can say, just for our start, what we can define the Anglo-Saxon period, and what is the Anglo-Saxon period in that part of history? Because many of us, when we talk sometimes about, example, Viking Age, we have some associations with this period too.
Yeah.
Say, oh, are many things that are closed, that we have this period, and next some influence for the next period.
Yeah.
And how you can say, what is that, the definition of this period?
If you study, as I do, language, I started by looking at older modern English, you know, the things that you study in school, Charles Dickens, Shakespeare. And I was dissatisfied because that takes you 500-600 years in the past. But you can go beyond that. You can go to the period of the Normans, 1066. They begin in England. But beyond that, you can go for another 500 years, and you come eventually to a period in the early 700s when there is nothing much written before for about 300 years. And then when you look at what is written before, it's all in Latin. So the period between 400 and 700 is a period when there is very little written down, but it must be a massive change. There must be huge social developments because we're dealing with the Roman Empire and a very literate culture, and then nothing. And then eventually we get 650, 700, we start to get writing in a completely different language, not related to Latin, not related to the Celtic languages which were spoken in Britain before. So it's a cut-off, it's a cliff edge. And that always made me very interested. How did this complete change take place? And it concerned eventually the I can't say the fall of the Roman Empire, but the decline, the gradual fading away of Roman power in Northern Europe, really, um, and the transition from the literate Roman culture to the medieval culture that replaces it, which is the English culture. So the Anglo-Saxon period conventionally starts about 400 AD, which is when Rome begins to fade, and it goes through politically to about 1100, so 700 years, which is it's the biggest single tranche of a single period in British history. We know about the Vikings, 200 years. It's small. We know about the Normans, not even 100 years. It's small. But for the Anglo-Saxons, 700 years, in at which time our language came, our social institutions, our laws, our family structure, the names for all the landscape. Most of the towns and villages have names in English. So it just is the foundation of the culture which went on to become, Great Britain, United Kingdom, and the modern world.
Oh, that's fantastic. We have a lot of history
Uh-huh.
in this period, and in this period is not a long period, but we have some significant things that are doing,
Yeah.
and for this, you have some biggest influence for the other spirits. Oh, that's a very very lots fantastic.
We're
See,
very fortunate in England to have vernacular literature, not Latin, not Greek, but actual records in our own language. So we have a series of documents called the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which is a chronicle. It's a calendrical listing, but it starts it well. We don't know exactly when it starts because we don't have the original documents. We have copies from later, but it's certainly the English part starts around 400 AD, and it's year by year by year what's happening, which king comes to power, which bishop is consecrated. There's a mighty storm. There's a raid from this kingdom to that kingdom. This king marries this queen, and so on. Very detailed, and towards the end of the period, immensely detailed, right down to the individual, towns and so on. The specifics of what happens to them. There is nothing, to my knowledge, there is no comparable, no similar record anywhere in Europe for this period outside Latin. It's not a Latin record; it's an English record. It's very interesting.
oh, that's very very interesting to know about that.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we saw from the spirits that was very interesting is that the successions of the kings, the pagan kings to the Christian kings, and the influence of kings from other lands, like in Age example,
Uh-huh.
and we saw that have some significant changes. Example, some rituals, funerals, changing from period to period. What we can say, these changes will have so much impact from other periods that you say, oh, we have some great funerals like Sultan who changed many things that we know about this period. And this funeral was, I think, is considered one of the last of that type of funeral. And the next funerals are having some changes. And what's the significance have this so biggest changes in this type of rituals that
Well,
occurred? We have some great rituals, but they become so simple with the time. How does this have this impact for that?
it's a very interesting question. I wish I had a definitive answer for you. I just have an opinion. Um, my opinion is that in the early period there is a multitude of gods, very powerful gods and very small gods who are in a waterfall or a tree or a rock. Um, local, maybe not even gods, maybe they are elves, maybe they are the spirits of the land. Um, and this is the religion which is brought by the Angles and the Saxons to Britain. Around 600, there is immense pressure from Rome for the conversion of the people of Britain, to make them Christian. And because Christianity had been in Britain during the Roman period, and then it was lost, forgotten. Maybe it continued here but not there. Who knows? It's a complicated picture. So how is it that very quickly, within 2 generations, the old pagan ideas, the heathen ideas, are no longer celebrated, no longer respectable? Um, I think that's not true. I think actually, for most people, life goes on as it always did. They still have their rituals. They still bless the plow in the spring so that the crops will grow properly. They still collect when they reap in autumn and collect the harvest. Though they honor something, some power. Maybe they call it a different name, but they have a continued respect for these ancient practices. What changes is at the very top of society, where you have kings and leaders, people who are interested in power and control. And for them, it's always a problem to get money from people. You can go to the farm and threaten the farmer, or show the farmer that you are important and powerful, and make him pay. But actually, that's a very ad hoc way of doing things and very time consuming. Much better not to take big payments from a few mighty people, but to take a little from everybody. Taxation system based on the wealth of the individuals. But to do that, you need records. You need to have an accurate record of who owns what and how much it's worth. And if to do that, you need literacy. And at this time, literacy is the preserve of the church. So for a king, it's very attractive to invite into the kingdom the church, to have scribes and monks who are taking care of spiritual well-being and so on. But the practical effect is that there is now accurate record keeping on a very small scale, and the kings then are able to extract tax evenly across the whole kingdom. So that period of change, when the old ways are still practiced, but Christianity is introduced and becoming dominant, this is the period of Sutton Hoo. We don't know definitely and for sure the year that ship was put in the ground. We don't know within 10 years, 20 years even. Could be 610, could be 630, could be a little later than that. There is very little material in the grave that can be dated to within a few years. Even the coins don't help. They were not minted in England, so they are all automatically not the local produce. So they're not contemporary with the burial. They were already old. Most of the material in the ship and the surrounding tomb could not be dated. For accurate dates at this time, you need wood, and the soil at Sutton Hoo is very corrosive. It eats wood, it eats anything organic, fabric, leather, fur, anything like that is consumed. So there's no wood there to test, and consequently, accurate dating is very difficult. There's an assumption, because we know about some of the kings of East Anglia from the writing of Bede, the Historia Ecclesiastica Gentis Anglorum, that there was a powerful king in East Anglia whose name was Radwald. And so we have a powerful king, we have an important burial. It's convenient to marry the two, but it's not necessarily true. We don't know for sure who this man was. If it was Radwald, then he had already had contact with Christianity because he traveled to Kent, where Christianity was established in England. We know this from the writing of Bede. And if it was Radwald, then that would explain some things, because in Kent, he accepted Christianity for the duration of his stay. But when he got home, he was persuaded not to abandon it, but it became one of many religious traditions that people followed. It was not dominant in East Anglia at this time. So that would explain why he was placed for his tomb into a ship and not into a nice carved sepulchre, as you would find in a nice Roman burial. Not like that at all. Different way of doing things. So that's not a great answer to your question, I'm afraid. It's
No,
a long and involved
perfect.
answer.
It's perfect, the question. Yeah, we have a lot of questions about that, because we have many doubts that we sometimes we can say that, because we don't have a definition for many things from this period.
Yeah,
As you say, we have a lot of things that are oral traditions, and this is
yeah.
that sometimes it's difficult to
Oral
comprehend.
traditions never give you dates.
Yeah,
Never.
yeah, that's true. And we can say, how was the point that make the transition for the Anglo-Saxons to the pagan period to Christianity? How they say, oh, we need this change, and we're doing this for our people, when we decide that we will accept the conversion
Yeah.
process. What we can say about that?
Well, we can say, as I mentioned just now, that it was a process which benefited kings. It benefited those people who were interested in extracting money and wealth from the farmers. Did it benefit the farmers? I don't think it really did. But once it became dominant, there's no way back, I'm afraid. The advantage that a monotheistic religion will have is that it's this way, it's certainty. There's no room for error or interpretation. It's the religion of the book, after all. So everything is written down. If we're not sure, we can refer to the book. Ask the book, we will get the answer. And of course, if you have oral tradition, which is just stored in the collective memory of a few people, there's no central record. I can't remember things. My wife can't remember things. So if we don't agree with, without written records, we don't know who is right. It's simply a question of opinion. And that was the weakness of the pre-Christian religion. There was no fixed tradition to refer to, no source of wisdom like the book, which could give you the answers. I don't know
Oh,
if that helps.
yeah, that's interesting. We saw that we have a figure from that time that was Penda of Mercia.
Hmm.
That was the is considered for many researchers the last king, warrior, and pagan,
Yeah,
and we can say that he tried to resist this some in some points of this new system in that was in the Anglo-Saxons period, or he doing the he in some point agrees with this chain. How we can say about this king
I
in
think
his
Penda,
religion?
it's very easy to characterize Penda as the great champion of heathen religion, but I don't think so. I really don't think so. From what Bede has to, all we have written about Penda is what Bede tells us. And what you have to remember is that Bede is Northumbrian. He's from the far north. And these people, his people, the Northumbrians, have been very powerful. But in his day, they're starting to not be quite so important. They're losing power, and they're losing power to Mercia. Mercia is in the center of England. It's the it has opportunities to fight everybody because it has lots of borders. So the Mercians can impose their will wherever they want to go. What Bede tells us about Penda is that he despised people who changed their religion. And he did this. With the point of this is that, like when if you are a warrior, you give your word, your bond, your oath to serve your lord. You can't change that. You can't change your mind and go and do something else. It's fundamentally wrong. If you give your word, you stick to it. And this was the point for Penda. Not that he disliked Christianity, he accepted that people were Christian, and he doesn't seem to have persecuted them for it. But he did not like the principle that you give your word and then you betray the man that you gave your word to. That's really not the way to behave. So Penda gets the press of being the great champion of heathenism. No, Penda is the great champion of doing what's right, and when you say something, you mean it.
Oh, that's interesting. Some it's very fun that because we can say in some point we have a lot of history channels that uh in the YouTube example that say, "Oh, Panda, it's big. It's he image is see like a big hero in the period." We say that they put some image of Pandas like a great war and fighter for his one one our purpose or his purpose of like his religion. He tried to establishment his
Yeah.
thinkings in a period that was beginning to become Christian, and it's interesting to saw that that's different perceptions of Panda.
My advice in all these things is don't do study. Go back to the sources. Go back to the original text, Bede, whoever, and read that. Don't just rely on what the guy down the road tells you, or the man on YouTube, or anybody. Don't accept what I say. Go back to the sources, read and understand, and then you will not be misled by yeah, by the misinterpretations of other people, me included.
Yeah.
That's why in my
And
books, normally I give, if to the extent that I can, I will quote the original and my translation, so that if my translation is wrong, there is a different interpretation or a better understanding, you have the text in front of you in Latin, in Old English, Old Norse, Gothic, so that you can check it. I'm not perfect. I can make a mistake. Scholarship moves on, new ideas arrive, and everything needs to be checked always.
yeah, that's true. And Professor, we are talking that religious was an important thing for the definitions in many societies, and the Anglo-Saxons is not different. And we can say about the period of the paganism was in a high moment of that time. What you can say about the gods and what they have some many influence from that society.
Well, this is a very difficult one, of course. To say anything very much about the gods of England before the arrival of Christianity is difficult. We don't have very much written. We have nothing written by the Anglo-Saxons themselves, and we have only what Roman writers, Frankish writers can tell us. So we don't have the view of an insider. We only have the view of the neighbor. Hmm? That's the first thing. There is information. There are clues. There are things that we can interrogate and interpret, and that's me. That's what I want to do. The first thing we can say is that the names of the gods are, if you stop somebody in the street here in England and ask about this, they don't know. It means nothing. But they use the names of the gods every day, because sun and moon, Sunday, and moon day, Monday, Teal in Tuesday, Warden in Wednesday, Thor in Thursday, Freya in Friday. So the names of the ancient gods are still alive, still in use, even though most people don't really know that they're using those names. Why is the name for why is the name Tuesday for Mardi? In French, it's Mardi, the day of Mars, Dies Martis in Latin, but in English we have Tilwas Day, and Til is not the same as Mars, not the same as Mars, but Til it has shares some characteristics. And the big thing with Mars is god of war, god of fighting, willpower, that kind of thing. And likewise, Til presumably had those qualities also. Otherwise, the equivalents would not have been made. It comes to the interpretatio romana, the Roman understanding of the concepts of outsiders. So that's some information. We have the place names, like I mentioned to you, Thundersley, where I grew up. That's a name that must come down from the time of the pre-Christian period, because no Christian would call a place after Thunor. That would be a very bad idea. Um, Beyond that, the big help in all this stuff is archaeology, because the finds from archaeology are not subject to intervention. The problem with manuscripts is they are copied, and corrupted at each point. Each time a copy is made, a new error is introduced. But with archaeology, there's no argument. You know, you find a sword, somebody had this sword, placed it in the ground, and here it is. Um, why did he put it in the ground? Well, that's another question that we can't always answer. We have the objects, we have the iconography, but we don't know what is the thought process behind it. What is the context? What is the meaning of burying a man with a sword and a spear, but not a helmet? Is it because he doesn't have a helmet? Well, maybe, but or maybe there's a reason, a taboo, a cultural prohibition on burying a helmet, except in exceptional circumstances, something like that. So yeah, it's an interesting period, and the transition to Christianity muddies the waters, makes it even harder to understand, because at Christianity arrives in Kent in 597 AD with the kings there, and it spreads very quickly. In 50 years, pretty much all the kingdoms of Britain are Christian, but the Christianity is only superficial. They say the right things. Maybe they go to church on Sunday for a couple of hours. They listen to the bishop when he tells them a story from the Old Testament, but actually nothing much changes. And that is, to me, very reassuring. It means that the language that we have recorded in the 9th, 10th, 11th century has its roots in the pre-Christian period, and we have poems from just that time. Poetry was, as Tacitus says in the Germania, the speaking of the Germanic people generally, that ancient songs which are their only form of record. Well, ancient songs. This is the poetry. These are the ancient records and mnemonic devices that they are using to recall the you know what happened before living memory, before the memory of people still alive. Not much of an answer, I'm afraid.
Well, yeah, we can say that we have a lot of influences from these gods since nowadays, and it's very very interesting that because they became important to periods like the Viking Age example, and they maintain some things but change some names and some characters, but they still are so strong
Ah,
in main presence of this culture, and this is very interesting
yeah,
to
the culture doesn't
observe
change
this.
so very much. The idea is that if somebody does harms you in some way, you're supposed to forgive them. But you read in the Chronicle the stories of the kings and their supporters. They're not forgiving people. Their revenge and bloodshed is very much the guiding principle. If you insult me, you will pay.
Yeah, I can say, Professor, that the Romans deities or gods have some influence from these gods of Anglo-Saxons. We can say that these gods have some experience that was a mix of the some characteristics of Roman gods, Greek and Roman gods, or they are only have his own characteristics and don't have this contact. How we can say about that? We have a very interesting object that the I think is the clave of Hercules that was a symbol that was used in the pagan period, and the next in the Viking Age, the Thor hammer appear, and they
Yeah,
have some similar use
yeah,
in the with the same context. How you
yeah.
can say about this influence?
The background to Roman mythology, Greek mythology, Celtic mythology, Baltic mythology, and Germanic mythology, the background is the same. It's the god in the sky who protects mankind, uses a thunderbolt as his weapon, and is an upholder of justice and the right way of the authority of the father, really. And that is common to all those traditions. And it was an aspect of pre-Christian religion that could easily be accepted by Christians because they have the big God in the sky who looks after people and judges them. So that very much remained in use. In detail, I think really what we're looking at is in Europe, in Northern Europe, from 2nd century AD onwards, there is immense prestige attached to Romanitas. The not just the ideas that Romans have, but the physical things, the material culture which Roman citizenship, Roman imperial power provided. And for that reason, there was always an interest in amongst, certainly in the in as what regards the Anglo-Saxons, um, there was always the interest to take something from the Roman world, but do something new with it. Not copy the Romans, but take the good things of their ideas and bring them into Germanic culture. As you mentioned, the Club of Hercules, which is worn very widely as a military pendant. I've handled them myself in gold with the little studs that stick out from the sides. It's a very common symbol, but this is transformed in Germanic society into the Club of Thunor, or Donar in German, and that over time is reinterpreted as a hammer. The Viking period Mjolnir amulets that you see everywhere nowadays are a later version of something the Anglo-Saxons had, which is slightly different. The in the Norse story, the hammer is made with a short handle, and the pendants, the amulets, are made with a short handle. But the early English ones are not short at all. They're proportionately much more natural, much more like a hammer or an axe that you would find in the workshop. So yeah, the Roman background is very pervasive. It's very alluring. It's everywhere, and you can spot things and say, ah, well, that of course the Romans had that, or they copied that from the Romans. And to some extent that is true of many things, but if the iconography has been copied, the story behind it is a new one. It's a local one. They take like on the helmet, the Sutton Hoo.
Oh,
You
amazing.
have,
You have one too.
of course, most people have one in England. No,
It's
not really.
fantastic. Uh,
You have the iconography. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. The iconography of the horseman with his
yeah.
spear, and he's riding down or trampling another figure who's underneath the horse's feet. That idea, that figure appears on Roman tombstones from 1st century AD. Near where I live, in the museum in the castle at Colchester, there is just this image on a Roman tombstone. But of course, in Roman context, it signifies the death of a great cavalryman and his overcoming a defeated foe. The meaning here is different. We don't know it for sure, but the rider is he's triumphant. Is he? I don't know. The man that he's riding on, his horse is trampling, is stabbing the horse. So he's not the defeated one. He's fighting back even as he dies. And behind the rider his spear is being guided by a small figure, a little, I don't know, is this the equivalent of a Valkyria who's making the warrior, making his spear go amiss so that he dies and then he can go to Valhalla? Or is it something else? We don't know. We don't have the enough records to be sure. But it's an adaptation of a Roman icon into a new context. And the same is true of so many of these things. Even the face here. Um, According to Dr. Sam Newton, who's something of an expert in these matters, the face is possibly based on, can never remember the name, so the Emperor Theodoric, or Theodoric the Ostrogoth, who was a Roman, at the very end of the Roman period. He was in power in Italy. And this face is plausibly associated with the face of the Gothic emperor. Maybe it's an attractive theory. Anyway, so
It's very interesting, know that. I don't have idea about that. I was very, very curious because I saw that we have a face, but I was thinking that was a configuration in that from the animals in the helmet
mm, mm,
that was
it is.
represent this, but have a people
It's
that probably was expressed in the face.
Yeah, but it is a face. We obviously it's a face,
Mhm.
but I'm sure Paul told you about the bird. It is at the same time a face and a bird and a snake. So it's not, is it this, is it that? No, it's both things at the same time. It is what in English is called a riddle, an enigma, a mystery, a little puzzle to solve. Is it a face? Well, yeah. But is it a bird? Well, yeah. So it's both things at the same time. And that is absolutely typical of Anglo-Saxon culture. They loved riddles. They loved having something to think about, a puzzle to solve, or a question to find the answer to. Absolutely typical of those times. Anyway, we're off topic.
Oh, that's fantastic. You say that have a figure that was conducted this war. It's you say referring to the bird that appear in with the warrior.
Hmm. You mean
Oh,
the bird of the face
no,
on the
when
plate?
you yes with the warrior in the horse, I think have
Yeah.
some
No,
a
not
little
this
bird
one.
with him. Yeah,
The figures from Sweden have two birds with the
yeah.
rider, but Sutton Hoo, no, it's
Okay. I
a
was
little
thinking that
man.
you don't have.
Yeah,
Oh,
a
don't
little
have.
man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Sweden,
You're thinking of
thinking
the
that those who haven't
Valskirta.
have.
Yeah, yeah,
No, I understand. I was thinking that have a bird in the Sutton
yeah.
helmet.
It's very similar imagery, but it's not
Mhm.
identical. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, fantastic. And Professor, one god was has used make a book in 2024, Woden,
Yeah.
and his god was one of the principal gods, as you can say, in that period.
Hmm.
And he was a big definition for many things that was doing in many points
Yeah.
in the religious times and for the society that
Yeah.
he represent. Uh, what you can say this is start to become Odin the most important of all of the gods. He became in some point the definition of our father and when he became Odin. And what we can say this is start for Odin became this god of this immeasurable things that he represent from the
Mm,
period.
mm. The beginning of that is probably in the 2nd century AD. I say that because I've been looking into this for a long, long time, longer than you have been alive, I'm sure. I've been studying this. Yeah, the gods are discrete to some extent. There's a god for agriculture, there's a god for justice, there's a god for warfare, there's a god for procreation and fertility and so on. But at a certain point, the god who's involved in warfare becomes much more important than all the others. And the reason for that is it's a social thing. Their society at that time, they are the people in the north are under threat from Rome, um, but they're also the young men are going off, leaving the homeland and taking service with the Roman army. So the whole of their society, the whole of their thinking is militarized at this time. They become not aggressive and bloodthirsty, not in that sense, but military service and the duties to comrades that are normal for men who fight in the military. They have to rely on each other. They have to trust each other. So these bonds of comradeship and friendship are very, very important. And this pattern of a leader and followers whom he can trust and rely on is then applied to society as a whole. So the god Warden begins as probably inspiration. The when you, as we were talking about with the riddles, you're thinking you have the problem before you, and then suddenly you know it, you've got the answer. That is the benefit of Woden. That is the originally what he can provide. The sudden inspiration, or the when you must sing, you have to, you can't control yourself. You're suffused with energy and you want to express it, and that's how you do it, with a song or a dance or something. That is what where he starts, and he starts here in the drink, because that is the source of the inspiration. That is the source of the impetus to make things happen, to get up, to give you energy, to give you engagement with the world. That is where the benefit of worshipping Woden. And of course, the society becomes, as I said, more militarized, more in the hands of young men who behave like that. And consequently, the old gods, the other gods to do with fertility or with justice and so on, they begin to fade. They're no longer quite so important. And because of this, um, the power of war then starts to spread. He becomes not just the god for inspiration, but he's also the god for war at this point, because to be inspired by Warden gives you an important advantage when you're fighting on the battlefield. But of course, it's no good to have military victories if you don't have children. You have to, when you earn, when you win, when you gain treasure, gain wealth, you need to have somebody to pass it to. Your line needs to continue. So he becomes associated then with dynasties, with the lineages of kings, and he's able to help with all that side of life. And so gradually the other gods grow smaller and smaller, and Odin spreads into the vacuum that they create, and eventually he's there for everything. If you don't, if whatever problem you face, you eventually, by Viking times, you're having to consult Odin. He's the only one who can help you.
Oh, that's interesting because we can say that it's a very interesting point that Thor and Odin, in some point, we can say that have some competition
Of
for
course.
attention for the persons in the period because Thor are very close to stealing the place of Odin in some aspects of rituals, of preferences, and it's interesting so that Odin became more important that figure of Thor example because they are very close to of preferences in the period.
Yeah.
And
For the
what
military, for men who are in the military, the figure of Thor is very important because he's not about um, it's not about asking Thor for a favor. Thor will just give you the strength to make it happen for yourself. You know, that's the answer you get from Thor, that you are, it's up to you. You do it and I will help you, but I'm not going to do it for you. And it's self-reliance, which is, again, it's a very important thing if you're in the military. In a militarized society, self-reliance is pretty much all you've got. That and your family is the only thing that stands between you and chaos. So
yeah. One interesting thing too is that the kings are very influenced by these aspects of God. We have many important works that uh, talk about that. That this relationship of kings being part of a dynasty that was originated by Odin. Odin was creating dynasties,
yeah,
and we can say that the king Redvald or many other king that was being possible be the Sultan who motif. Um, they are, how can I say, how this is became created to in some aspects that kings are part of Odin, and this was present in some point of example in helmet. We see that have some symbol that here in the this part of the helmet
yeah,
are a difference that show that all the eye of Odin are present, and probably he think he was part of a dynasty of Odin.
yeah,
And in the Viking Age, you have the famous saga that Ynglinga saga was this have these relations of kings and queens that was part of an Odin dynasty. And why this was used for the period to establishment the power of these kings.
um, I think, personal opinion, I think if you are a king, then Odin is very much the god you are interested in. I say this because you read in the Icelandic sagas, if you look at in the early verse as well, you find that the ideal is that a man like King Penda was so keen uh, Penda in England was very keen to push the idea of a man says his word, gives his word, makes a promise, gives an oath, and he does that. He does what he says. His word becomes a deed. Um, but for the kings, it's not quite like that, and for Odin, it's not like that. In all the stories that we read of Odin, what are the things that he does? He breaks his word. He says what he needs to say to get the result he wants, but he doesn't keep the promise. He behaves appallingly. He seduces women and leaves them. He makes promises to his men and to strangers, to anybody. just to get what he wants. Doesn't that sound like a king? Doesn't that sound like the kind of self-serving, selfish behavior that you would expect from people at the top of society who have very little regard for those underneath them? They use them to the point that they can get good from them, and then it's over. And that, I think, is why Warden was such a favorite with the royal families, because his behavior is typical of aristocrats of any age and culture. Beyond that, of course, we know a lot about Odin because he is the god who inspires, as I mentioned, the singing, the poetry, all the entertainment, all the which is the record keeping. It is the only reference point for these people, and consequently, he is the patron for the poets, and the poets are paid by the kings, rewarded by the kings. So there's a symbiotic relationship there. Of course, the kings love Odin, because he gives them the sanction to behave as they do, to make war, to take decisions about people's lives, and the poets love them for it because the poets benefit from the wealth. When the man gives his word to behave in such and such a way, he turns his word into a deed. The poet takes the deed, the battlefield victory, the whatever it is, and he turns it back into words. So you have a circularity. Word becomes deed, deed becomes word. And it's the leaders and the poets who keep this circle, keep this wheel turning. They're forever feeding off each other, promoting each other, promoting the kinds of behavior that I've just mentioned. Not very glamorous. I'm sorry, not very glamorous.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Saw that transitions of perspectives of God Odin in these dynasties, because we saw that they are very engaged to show how much they are very close to a god, a fighter god or a war god that were relationship with the warriors. And this is very interesting because we saw in many aspects of the art of the period
Mm.
this relationship with Odin and some figures that are related to him,
Yeah.
uh, in birds or representations of eagles or ravens
Yes.
that we saw this so close aspects of that. And Professor, we saw that Walden have many characteristics that probably have some little change with time to time. What we can say the comparison of the, how can I say, some aspects that are similar or different to the aspects of Odin in Anglo-Saxon period to the transition to the Viking Age period. He was totally
Mm.
different, or they are similar causes or different things that you observe in Voden or the transformation to Odin.
Very good question, actually, because the evidence for Warden in English is not very prolific. There's not very much written. He appears in a gnomic poem where the poet just says, Warden workte wells. Warden created holy places, sanctuaries. Doesn't tell you anything. But interesting etymological point. The word well for a holy place in Norse is called the equivalent word, the cognate word is ver. Warden cognate in Norse Odin. Odin and Ver were those two of the creator gods in Gudvagining, Snorri's recapitulation of Norse myth. Odin is the high god, but he has the two brothers, Vili and Ver. So surely the Anglo-Saxons knew this. They had the similar tradition, but the poet is writing in a Christian context, so he doesn't give you all the details about of the myth. He just slips in something to point out that he knows this stuff. Um, is is the Anglo-Saxon period so very different from the Vikings? I don't think so. I think if you look at the history of Scandinavia and Britain as a whole, you have a process whereby young men who, in Scandinavia, it's difficult to make a living. The land is not very fertile, and well, it's fertile, but there's not much of it that you can actually cultivate. So it's difficult if you're from a large family to make a good living there. There's fishing, there's hunting, there's collecting bear skins and things you can sell. But by and large, it's not an easy place to live. And the winters are very harsh and the summers are not always good. So the where was I going with this? I've completely forgotten the question. I'm so sorry. Where was I going with that? I've lost it completely. I'm so sorry, Matthew. I've completely forgotten the question. Where was I going with that?
The question is, what you can observe the changes of the figure of Odin,
Yes.
because he have
Yeah.
some
So
aspects in Anglo-Saxon period and the change for Odin to the
yeah.
Viking Age.
So Anglo-Saxon society is an offshoot. It's an early form of Scandinavian society in broad terms. So the the distinctions between Warden among the English, Odin amongst the Norse, is only a distinction of 500 years of history, social developments, and so on. They are, in essence, in the beginning, it's the same idea, the same God, the same processes which give rise to both, and the forms of worship for both are very similar. It's the big difference between Anglo-Saxon England and Scandinavia in the 8th century, when the Vikings appear, is in almost nothing. They're not different people. They have the same weapons, they have the same ships, they wear the same clothes, they do the same things in their family life. The big difference is in England, you have literacy, you have record keeping, you have a medieval society, whereas Scandinavia, it's still an Iron Age society. It's still based around chiefs, chief of this village, chief of this valley, chief of this river, but they don't have bigger units than that. They don't at this time. They don't have a cohesive society, and they don't have a medieval society. They don't have kings at the top of the society drawing their wealth from a large area. The kings are all small kings, smalkungar as they call them. They're all uh, chieftains. They don't have the big organization ability because they don't have literacy at this time. That's the big difference.
Oh, that's very interesting. And we can say that the third difference of this is when the writing aspects are certain in the post-Viking age, and that a figure was drawn by many aspects. We can say that, for example, in Snorri's Edda became a figure that were more pure, became, how can I say? He Odin become in some aspects of true aspects in some drawings, in some descriptions by writings,
Yeah.
but not exactly like it was in the Viking Age, because they don't have idea what it was in that
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
We have little glimpses, little small fragments that you can put the different pictures together, and maybe you can see something, but we'll never know the whole thing. We can never know that.
Oh, that's fantastic. And Professor, we have some aspects from the Old Norse language
Uh-huh.
that in some point what we can say that what connected to the Old English in some variations, but are completely different language. What can the definition of the Olden English language and how she works? We can describe a little about, because many persons sometimes think that Olden English are the same thing of Old Norse, or they are have some same structures. How do you can you describe of
Well,
the?
all the good records of Old English begin in 700s and go through 500 years from there. And they're still writing Old English in 1200, but it's changing. For Norse, the language of Scandinavia, it's very similar. Um, and in fact, the modern English comes down from a dialect of the Midlands of England. Um, but standard Old English is a dialect of the West, and it's a very different thing. It's much more like German. The word for they are in German, sie sind. In Old English, hier sind. Sind, not sind, but same word. In Norse, there eru. So it's and in Northumbrian Old English, tha eru. So they sound very similar because they come from the same beginning. They have the same structure generally. They're Germanic languages. They have, all that fun stuff that we study with sing, sang, sung, bring, brought, do, did, all those strange verbs that you don't get in Latin or any of the Romance languages. They're all there in English. They're all there in Norse. They vary, they differ a little, but it's the same thing. A man who could speak um, good Old English in the year 1000 could understand a Norseman, a Norwegian or a Dane, could understand him. And maybe by carefully choosing the words, they can communicate. When the Viking army turns up in Essex, where I live, in the year 991, they take over an island and oh gosh, I'm sorry, this is my man. Can we pause there for a moment?
Yeah, no
Yep,
problem.
I'll be back
I waiting
shortly.
you.
Thanks. Sorry about that. You
No
can edit
problem.
that bit out. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, when the Vikings turned up at the town of Malden in 99,
Professor,
are you
just a
recording?
moment. Your camera became static again.
Oh, let me turn it off and turn it on.
Okay,
It's good?
okay, good.
So, yeah, similarities between Old English and Old Norse. When the Vikings turned up at Malden in the year 991, they there was about to be a battle, and the Viking messenger called across the water to the English leader on the mainland and said something to him in Old Norse, and the man here could understand him and could reply to him. They use similar words, not identical. So the in Norse, the word for a horse is hross, and the word for the horse, hrossit. They put it at the end to make the. In English, the word for horse is horse, not hross, but horse. Same word, slightly different. The horse, that horse. So you've got Norwegian saying hrossit, English people saying that horse. Best thing is to just forget all that and just say horse, and we'll worry about the grammar and the details. You know, we don't need all that stuff. The basics of the language are absolutely identical. They're not different in kind. They're just different in some of the selections, some of the choices they've made. The word for a stone in Norse is stein, in English stan. The word for a ship in Norse is skip, in English ship, and so on. The word for the tunic that you wear in Norse it's skirt, in English shirt. So that's why you have the Norse word skirt now for a garment, and the English word shirt. Shirt and skirt, it's the same word, but one in Norse, one in English. So did they did this similarity of language make them better friends? Not always, because like members of the same family, they don't always agree, which is why we've had so many problems with we had so many problems with the Scandinavians at that time. But the background to English, the background to Norse is absolutely the same. Go back 1,000 years, they can understand each other. Go back 2,000 years, it's the same language completely.
Mm.
Mm.
It's very, it's very curious because I was thinking here that it's very interesting. When we saw some series like the Viking series, if you know, they try to how can I say, talking with each other, but one don't understand the language with the
Yeah,
other. And we saw that they have, as you say, have some similarity, but change some things,
yeah,
and it's not the same language. And they in some points they don't agree in many aspects, but it's very funny because they create a situation that in some point they understand each other.
of course. Yeah,
Some point, example, Ragnar in the series of Viking series,
mm.
he talk in Old Norse with some of with his brother or some of
A
their
comrade.
friend. And
Yeah,
but when he tried to talk with the Englishman, he understand what he was spent. It's very funny, so that because
yeah,
the series pass an image that everyone's have his own language, but they understand next the language of each other,
yeah.
and this is
It seems so
uh
different, doesn't it?
interesting.
So
Yeah,
difficult. Yeah, yeah. I'm
it's
sure, but they could understand each other. The
yeah.
languages are not very different after all. And even today, a Norwegian can say "amun gan hjem," and in the north of England they'll say "amun gan hjem," and it's the same. I must go home. It, Yem for hjem and gan for go. The dialects are still you can understand. If you can understand one, you can understand the other. Yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting to saw that. And we can say that how we can say express the structures of the old in English language.
Mm.
They have some adjectives, some subjects. How we can describe the work and acknowledgement about the old English
Compared to
language.
modern English.
Yeah, the
Yeah, right.
comparison to modern English.
Yeah. Well, the structures are still there. You cannot make sentences in modern English without using Old English words. That's absolutely true. And all the basic words, all the words at the heart, most of them, like hair, eye, ear, cheek, mouth, nose, neck, chest, arm, finger, what they're all Old English words. The names for parts of the body, generally Old English. There's, well, not face, actually. Face comes from French. And that's because the English word is undulita, which is a long and complicated word, and we like short, easy words. So, face is a nice, short, easy word, so it's displaced Undulita as the name for this. In German, it's Antlitz, of course, which is the same as the English word. Um, leg comes from Norse. The Old English name is Shanka, shank, which is still there, but it's not the normal word for that thing. And stomach. Stomach, stomachos from Greek. It's a sort of medical term. Other than that, wrist, finger, hand, nail, all these things, all directly from Old English. The structure of modern English is still really the same as Old English. We go demonstrative, adjective, noun, the good boy, not the boy good, as you would in, for example, French or probably Portuguese. I don't know. I don't have much Portuguese, but you have adjective after the noun
What
normally.
did you, adjective of after the noun? Um, I think
My
yes.
good friend. Yeah, my good friend or my friend good.
Oh, it's my good friend.
Is it? Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Oh no, is my friend good?
It is. I
Sorry.
thought so. I
Is
thought
the
so. Yeah.
I sorry,
So,
I
yeah,
changed the
yeah.
is my friend
Demonstrative
good?
noun adjective. English demonstrative adjective now, always. And that's just something that's still with us. And all these funny verbs like sing, sang, sung, and ring, rang, rung, and see and sort, and all these things are all from Old English. Most of them in Old English are regular. They're the normal way of doing things, and we've got away from that. The the language has changed in 1,000 years. Not always for the best, but I can't change it. I can't reverse it.
Yeah, I think it's depend of the definition in as you ask me about Portuguese because
Mm.
sometimes we can use my because the translation for an English is a little different, but we can say meu amigo é bom, my friend good, but we have this a is the addiction of to complement the phrase, and in English we have these words that don't have this some complements. Is
Oh,
my good friend. It's a very very different, and because that some persons have difficult sometimes to speak the English. I think English is more easy to speak. I
really?
have yeah,
No,
I
you're
think
crazy.
Portuguese is difficult. I talk this language, but it's not easy. I told you, is difficult and have a lot of regrets. And every year the regrets change. It's a
Wow,
confusion. And sometimes
wow.
I feel confusion when I talk my own
Yeah,
language.
yeah.
And
Uh,
This is
That's interesting.
I
Wow.
think
Yeah.
I will be learning much more if all the English example that Portuguese. Probably I will learn much more the all this type of language. Old Norse example have many similarities, and this is
Yeah.
very very nice. And the I think Old Norse is similar to the old Icelandic language,
Yes,
very close.
Icelandic has changed hardly at all since
Mhm.
1,000 years, whereas I'm sure Portuguese has changed a lot, and certainly English has. Yeah.
Yeah, because they are not closer some closer language. Portuguese is more proximate to is more close to
Spanish?
Latin language.
Yeah,
More
all the
close to
Romance.
Spanish. Yeah, Spanish
Yeah.
and Portuguese are very close to
Yeah.
the Latin language.
When I hear
And
Portuguese, I sometimes I can't tell if it's Portuguese or Spanish because until you get
yeah,
the S sound, the sh, and then I know
yeah,
it's Portuguese. Yeah.
is they have some aspects that are closed, but some aspects are different.
Yeah, of course.
They the example in Spanish, some words that are in Portuguese are changing.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
It's very very fun in all that because we think that a word in Portuguese is the same thing in Spanish. No, it's different.
Yes,
But this word have in Portuguese vocabulary, but
true.
change
Yeah,
the significance of the words in Spanish. This is funny about the
yeah,
language.
yeah, yeah.
Professor, I would like to thank you so much for doing this interview for
My
the
pleasure.
channel.
I'm sorry
I
we had
was
some technical problem, but
no problem. It's amazing. I learned a lot with you about your work, about all the things that you put in your books. Is amazing your work in your books that you developed. I wouldn't it surprised me. I read in some pages
did
for the book.
do you
Oh,
have a copy of this?
no, I read an online copy that was find some
Ah,
pages of that, and
okay.
I read because let me explain you. Here in Brazil, books that was not released here are very
Mm,
expensive because they have some prices in example dollar and sometimes euro, and when we are buying here in Brazil, they are really, really expensive to
yeah,
buy.
yeah,
And sometimes I have to use some books that are available sometimes in some sites that are not example sites of buying because it's difficult for us buying books from other countries.
yeah. I
Yeah,
understand.
and
Yeah.
and sometimes I don't have to have the book in physical form. I have
Yeah.
to
So a PDF is good enough.
PDF
Yeah.
to search for sites that available some books that put some books. And example, Internet Archive have a lot of books
Yes.
from
Yeah.
other countries. They doing a great work to put the books, and we read in some. Sometimes he put some pages, but sometimes they put the all book in the. And I
Yeah.
what I find, and I read. It's I think you have a book that you write with some pictures that I liked so much is for the collection. It's Anglo-Saxon kings and warlords. For it's a collection that have books of about Vikings, about many, and they illustrated
This
with
one.
many things.
This one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I did that with
I love these books. Have
Raffaele
many.
Camacho. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
love.
It's a lot of fun to do, actually. Raphael is a friend, and he's obsessed with Romans. Everything is Romans. It doesn't matter what you show him; it's always Romans. So we had a lot of fun arguing about where these, if you've got a sword, well, is it a Saxon sword? Oh no, it's a Roman sword. Every time it's a Roman sword. Yeah. He's mad. He's
Yeah,
lovely man. Lovely man.
yeah, have beautiful pictures,
Yeah,
drawings.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Just
fantastic.
somebody.
I love this collection. Have many books. Have Vikings. Have Romans. Have well, it's a
Ah,
big collections.
ah, yeah. If you have Roman books, he's done, I don't know, 20, more than 20 Roman books with Osprey, with this publisher. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
Offspring. This collection is fantastic. They released that. I read. I think much more of the books, but not all. But the much more
yeah,
of they release. I every time they release, I love to read because it's amazing.
they're good.
It's
Yeah,
yeah, and the illustrations are
yeah.
beautiful.
It's the illustrations that make it, really, I think. The
Yeah,
text is rubbish, but, you know.
so, thank you for doing this interview. You have some suggestion of books for the audience of the channel that you like to give.
Well,
That's
you obviously, and everybody needs a copy of Woden. Everybody needs that. For my books, I've got so many here. Do you have? Well, you have, I think, the Elder Gods.
the other gods. Yeah,
Yeah,
other
that
gods.
would that
Yes, fantastic.
that's a big lot of work in there. And the newest one is the Mead Hall.
Oh, the mid hole. I need to
Yeah,
do
which is
this
new
in
version.
physical version.
So yeah, this will be it's a lot of work in here. All my books are the product of a lot of thought and a lot of study, but I can't help it, you know. I'm just
Yeah.
obsessed.
Yes, it's fantastic books. I recommend for all people here in the channel to
Ah,
have the Stephen Pollington books because it's amazing. It's an adventure for a period that are very related. It's the Viking Age,
ah,
but it's a different period. But
yeah,
have many inspirations
yeah,
for
yeah.
for Viking
You
Age. No,
you
it's very
bored of
close.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah.
it's amazing.
Well,
So
keep looking because there'll be another no, not another mythology book within a year, I think. I'm still
oh,
working, but so check back with me and I'll let you know
oh, thank you.
if
Ah,
it's
it will be amazing. So
yeah,
that book.
good, good.
I just stopped the recording,
Uh-huh.
just for a moment.